When people think about ancient civilizations, their minds usually travel to familiar places: the stone cities of Rome, the temples of Greece, the pyramids of Egypt, or the empires of Asia and Mesoamerica. North America, by contrast, is often portrayed as a land without true cities or complex societies before European contact. This belief is one of the greatest historical myths. Long before Columbus crossed the Atlantic, a massive urban center flourished along the Mississippi River. It was carefully planned, densely populated, and ruled by powerful elites who controlled religion, labor, and territory. This city did not belong to a small tribe. It was the heart of a civilization. Its name was Cahokia. At its height, Cahokia was the largest city north of Mexico. Its population rivaled that of London or Paris in the Middle Ages. Monumental earthworks dominated the landscape. Plazas organized public life, and a complex social order governed tens of thousands of people. Without writing, without metal tools, and without beasts of burden. Yet today, Cahokia is almost unknown. There are no surviving texts written by its rulers, no epic poems, no recorded kings or dates. When Europeans arrived centuries later, the city was already abandoned, its great mounds slowly being reclaimed by the earth. What remained was silence. This absence raises unsettling questions. How can a civilization of this magnitude vanish so completely from collective memory? Why was Cahokia excluded from the traditional narrative of world history? And what does that omission reveal about how we define civilization itself? Cahokia challenges the idea that complex societies only emerged in certain parts of the world. It forces us to recognize that North America once hosted a powerful urban civilization, one that rose, dominated, and collapsed long before European contact. To understand Cahokia is to rethink the history of an entire continent. And to begin that journey, we must first accept a simple truth. The past of North America is far older, richer, and more complex than we were ever taught. And this is where that forgotten story begins. Cahokia was not a village, a camp, or a temporary settlement. It was a true city, carefully organized, politically centralized, and economically powerful. Located near the confluence of the Mississippi, Missouri, and Illinois rivers, Cahokia occupied one of the most strategic positions in North America. This location was no accident. The rivers functioned as highways, allowing trade, communication, and influence to extend hundreds of kilometers in every direction. Cahokia became the core of a vast network, connecting distant communities across the continent, exchanging goods, ideas, and religious practices. At its peak, around the 11th and 12th centuries, Cahokia was home to tens of thousands of people. Its population likely exceeded that of many contemporary European cities. Dense neighborhoods surrounded a ceremonial and political center, with large public plazas designed for gatherings, rituals, and displays of authority. Calling Cahokia primitive misunderstands its achievement. The city operated without writing, metal tools, or draft animals, yet it managed large construction projects, complex logistics, and social coordination on a massive scale. Power was not scattered. It was concentrated, organized, and enforced. Cahokia was not an isolated anomaly. It was the capital of a Mississippian civilization that shaped much of eastern North America. For centuries, it stood as proof that urban life, hierarchy, and large-scale planning were not exclusive to the Old World. Understanding what Cahokia was forces us to abandon outdated assumptions and recognize it for what it truly represented, one of the great cities of the pre-modern world. What truly set Cahokia apart was its monumental landscape. The city was dominated by more than 100 massive earthen mounds, carefully shaped and positioned to structure political, religious, and social life. At the center stood Monk's Mound, the largest earthen structure ever built in North America. Taller than a 10-story building and covering more ground than the Great Pyramid at Giza, it was not a natural hill, but a human-made platform constructed with millions of tons of earth, carried basket by basket over generations. At its summit likely stood the residence or temple of Cahokia's supreme ruler. These mounds were not random. They were arranged around vast open plazas, creating a planned urban core designed for ceremonies, public gatherings, and displays of power. The layout reveals advanced knowledge of geometry, engineering, and collective labor organization. Cahokia was also deeply connected to the sky. Certain structures aligned with solar events such as equinoxes and solstices, suggesting astronomical observation played a role in governance and religion. Time, space, and power were tightly linked. This was not a city that grew by chance. It was deliberately designed to impress, to control, and to endure. The mounds were not just architecture. They were symbols of authority, belief, and a worldview in which leaders stood physically and spiritually above the population. Cahokia was a city built from earth, but shaped by ideology. Cahokia was not an egalitarian society. Power was concentrated in the hands of a ruling elite who controlled religion, labor, and resources. At the top stood a central authority, likely a divine or semi-divine ruler, whose legitimacy was reinforced through ritual, ceremony, and monumental architecture. Religion was the foundation of political power. Belief systems linked the ruler to cosmic forces, the sun, the seasons, and the balance of the world itself. Public rituals held in the great plazas were not only spiritual events but demonstrations of authority, reminding the population who controlled order and meaning. Archaeological evidence suggests strict social hierarchy. Elite burials were accompanied by valuable goods, symbols of status, and in some cases human sacrifices. These acts were not random violence, they were deliberate displays of control, reinforcing obedience through awe and fear. Despite the absence of writing or metal tools, Cahokian leaders maintained stability through ideology rather than brute force alone. Belief replaced bureaucracy. Ritual replaced law. In this system, power did not need constant enforcement. It was accepted as part of the natural and cosmic order. Cahokia shows us that complex states do not require writing to rule effectively. They require something far more powerful, belief shared by thousands, shaped by ritual, and enforced by tradition. The fall of Cahokia was not sudden, dramatic, or caused by a single catastrophe. Instead, it was a slow and complex collapse, one that unfolded over generations. As the population grew, the environment began to suffer. Massive deforestation was required to build mounds, homes, and fuel daily life. This led to soil exhaustion, increased flooding from the Mississippi, and declining agricultural productivity. The very landscape that had once sustained Cahokia became unstable. At the same time, signs of internal stress began to appear. Archaeological evidence points to social inequality, nutritional decline among common people, and increasing violence. As resources became scarce, the ideological system that held society together may have started to crack. When belief weakens, power follows. Climate change likely intensified these pressures. Periods of colder temperatures and unpredictable weather would have made large-scale agriculture even more difficult, amplifying famine and unrest. Rather than being destroyed, Cahokia was gradually abandoned. Neighborhoods emptied. Ceremonial centers fell silent. By the time Europeans arrived in the region centuries later, the city was already gone, its mounds standing as mute witnesses to a forgotten rise and fall. Cahokia did not collapse because it failed to be civilized. It collapsed because it was a civilization, vulnerable to the same environmental, social, and ideological limits that have undone great cities throughout history. The legacy of Cahokia challenges one of the most persistent myths of American history: the idea that North America was largely empty or culturally simple before European contact. Cahokia proves the opposite. It was a true city, a center of power, belief, and innovation that shaped an entire region. Although Cahokia left no written records, its influence did not vanish. Archaeological evidence shows that ideas, symbols, and social structures spread far beyond the city itself, shaping Mississippian cultures across eastern North America for centuries. Its disappearance was not a failure of intelligence or organization, but a reminder that all complex societies are fragile. For a long time, Cahokia was ignored or minimized because it did not fit traditional definitions of civilization. No stone temples, no written laws, no empires recorded in books. Yet its scale, planning, and social control place it among the great urban centers of the pre-modern world. Remembering Cahokia is not just about correcting the past, It is about expanding our understanding of human history. Great cities have risen and fallen in many forms, in many places, often without leaving a voice of their own. Cahokia reminds us that silence does not mean absence. Sometimes it means we simply forgot where to look.